Yeah, welcome to this month's New Hampshire Insurance Department webinar. We're discussing flood insurance, joined by colleagues here at the New Hampshire Insurance Department and at Emergency Management. And so a couple housekeeping items before we get started. We're always happy to entertain questions, so please type them into the chat window, and at the end of our presentation, we'll take a second to address those. We are joined by our Commissioner, DJ Bettencourt. So for some opening remarks, we'll turn it over to the Commissioner.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate it very much. As Andrew mentioned, my name is DJ Bettencourt, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Commissioner of the New Hampshire Insurance Department. Really grateful to our colleagues across state government for joining us for this month's webinar on a really important topic. We all appreciate the fact that we cannot control the weather, and we also appreciate the fact that here in New Hampshire, we don't have a lot of the same weather considerations that a lot of other states do. We're a very safe state. May get a little bit cold sometimes, but we don't really have to worry about those hurricanes or tornadoes. But according to our friends over at the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services, flooding is New Hampshire's most common and costly natural disaster. And by most estimates that we have been able to find, fewer than 35% of New Hampshire property owners buy flood insurance. And this is a huge problem. We understand that there are several misconceptions that the public has that frequently results in so few people having adequate flood insurance coverage. The first being that most people assume that their home insurance covers any flood damage they might have, but it doesn't. Your underlying homeowners insurance does not include flood. And so it is critical to appreciate that homeowners insurance is going to need to be supplemented by a flood insurance policy to ensure that, God forbid, there should be flood damage to your home, that you're going to have protection. Another frequent example of misconceptions that we hear are that people have a false sense of security. They think that they live on a property that they've always considered to be high and dry, and then the natural disaster, the flood occurs, and now they're in trouble. And so it's important for residents to remember that all of us in our homes are at risk of some kind of flood damage. It's just how much exposure to that potential damage might you have. And finally, we know that one of the other misconceptions is that flood insurance is costly. Well, we looked into that too. And so according to InsureFi, the average cost of flood insurance in New Hampshire is approximately $1,098 per year, which breaks down to approximately $92 a month. Now, if that price seems high, consider that according to FEMA, as little as 1 inch of flood water can cause up to $25,000 worth of damage in your home. And so when you think of the numbers in that context, we really hope you will come to appreciate how small of an investment that flood insurance policy is, given the potential danger and the financial strain that could follow on from that without having appropriate coverage. In the end, I always try to raise awareness of the importance of flood insurance by asking a really difficult question. And the question that I ask consumers is, if your home was completely lost in a flood, would you have the financial resources to replace everything that you would lose? And I think that when people think carefully about that question, they'll come to appreciate that flood insurance is a coverage that they should have. So what we're going to get into today are what the opportunities are to get flood coverage, how it all works, the importance of it. And as I've said, we've got a great group of folks here with us today to do that. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to them.
We'll start with Vanessa Palange, who is the Community Outreach Coordinator for New Hampshire Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Vanessa, welcome.
Thank you for having me join you today. Thank you very much, Andrew. Thank you, Commissioner Bettencourt. As Commissioner Bettencourt mentioned, flood insurance is extremely important to New Hampshire, and the the fact that floods are the #1 natural hazard in New Hampshire really means that the entire state can be affected by any sort of flooding event. Our agency works with all 234 communities throughout the state, and a lot of times when we are working with them, it has to do with a flooding event. We have seen a lot of disasters declared in the state in the most recent years having to do with flooding. So one of the things that we like to do is make sure that people understand what they can do themselves to be prepared. And we take this preparedness into 4 steps. We tell people to stay informed, have a plan, make a kit, and get involved. It's very easy to do. And all of the information that I'm talking about can be found on our website, readynh.gov. So stay informed. We want people out in communities to make sure that they have a way to understand information about the weather, whether it is apps on your phone, watching local TV stations, paying attention to the National Weather Service. There are all these different things that are available that can really help you stay informed, knowing if a storm is coming. We were talking earlier, we have some inclement weather coming in this weekend. It is going to include some sort of precipitation, whether it is snow or rain or both, possibly even some freezing temperatures. And knowing that this is coming in really can help you protect your home and your family. So those some of the apps that we have talked about, there's apps from the National Weather Service. FEMA has a free app that you can download to your phone. Here at the state level, we have what's called NH Alerts, where you can sign up at readynh.gov, and those messages that could be given out to you can go to anything from an email to a landline to your cell phone. And then we use an app called Genesis Protect that is specifically on your phone that you can download to your phone. In addition to that, you also should sign up for local alerts in your local community. And a lot of times those local communities will have some spot on their website where you can go in and sign up. I know in my community, I had the ability to choose which sort of alerts I would like to receive, as well as how I would like to receive those. So that's just the first step that you can take. And then we talk about making a plan. Make sure when you have your family emergency plan that you're including all members of your family. If they have specific needs, could be medications, could be that they have, they need assistance with getting around, with moving. Make sure that you're including every member of your family and your pets as well. So one of the things that we found a couple years ago, there was a bad flooding event 2 summers ago. We saw about a month of rain between June and July, and we were communicating with local communities. They had several roads shut down, and we had one local community that contacted us because people were going around barriers. And we found that one of the people who went around a barrier, and she was with her young child in her vehicle, she'd started to drive through the roadway into floodwaters. And when they had to come and rescue her, they asked her why she had done so. And she said that part of the reason was she needed to get home to take care of her pets. So having some sort of plan in place, if you do have pets, a lot of people will plan for something like a fire in their house, but they don't plan for a flooding event. They don't plan for the fact that you might not be able to get home, and having some sort of meeting spot that is away from your house, and also making sure that you have some sort of plan in place with your neighbors, as I mentioned, if you do have pets. And then the kit, the emergency kit, same thing. So if you are unable to get to your house, I actually have an emergency kit that I keep in the back of my car. I change it out with the seasons. Right now I have a pair of rain boots in there because we have been seeing a lot of rain happening. Making sure you have something in your car that if you can't get home, you are able to utilize if you need to go to a shelter or another place, or if you are at home, that you have enough provisions. We all had to quarantine at some point during COVID, likely, and a lot of people now know what sheltering in place at home looks like because of that, but just making sure that you have that kit that's ready to go and it has everything that you need in it, from things like clothing to medications, to cash and documents. So I know we were just talking about that flood insurance. You want to make sure that you have copies of any insurance plans that you have in your emergency kit, along with other documents such as copies of a passport or a license. And they need to be in some sort of plastic bag or container that is waterproof to make sure that that those are staying safe, not getting ruined with floodwaters. And then lastly, as I mentioned, the getting involved. We tell people, I talked about, right, having those communications with your neighbors, get involved in your local community so that if something were to happen, you have those connections and are able to put them in place to keep you and your family safe.
I think that, no, I think that was a great presentation. As to that issue, the preparedness thing, I would just add that I know that the Commissioner Bettencourt has put together what I call like a fast reaction team. So if there is a disaster in New Hampshire, like a significant flood, that's widespread, let's call it that, we're going to try to get people in the area quickly to help with the insurance issues. I do think it's a good idea to have your insurance policy so it's easy to remember exactly who your carrier is, because not everybody would even remember that in a disaster situation. So I think that's very important to make sure you have your important documents as to coverage with you. Putting that aside, I was tasked with talking about insurance coverage. And obviously, as the insurance department, we're well versed in homeowners insurance, so I think we'll start there. So, as the commissioner said, it doesn't cover flood. How this basically works is in New Hampshire, there's a statute called RSA 407, which is what we call the fire policy. And as a matter of statute, that actually is a full policy in the statute. It's the only line of business that has that, partly because of its importance, and it goes back over 100 years because there have been a lot of problems with policies that were not what they had represented to be. But after fire, so the peril of fire and lightning actually, insurance companies can provide other coverages. Most people get what's called a HO3, which is a homeowner's policy, and as to the building, it's open peril, so it initially covers all perils, so in that sense it would cover a flood, but then it has exclusions, and the exclusions include flood, so therefore that HO3 doesn't cover flood for buildings. And then as far as the contents of your home, that's a named peril policy within the homeowner's policy, and that does not cover flood either, so you wouldn't, as a matter of insurance contract, initially receive coverage for either your building or the contents of your building. The general reason for that is if you think about floods can be very widespread, and so if one insurance company has many policies in an area and it's hit by a significant flood, then they could be a financial too big of a financial impact for the company. So that is not something they do. But what they do, just to be clear, so I know we always use this word flood, so I wanted to be clear. The best way to think about flood in my mind is if it's surface water or groundwater, that is going to be what we view as not covered by the policy. So if it, for example, rains and then either seeps into the ground and attacks your foundation and floods that way, or if it just the water rises and it comes into your home, however the water damages your home, that's going to not be covered by a homeowner's policy. What would be covered is if you have pipes in your house that bursts. Now, not always covered. There are other exclusions. So, for example, if you have a pipe that bursts in your house and then they find out you didn't maintain the heating system in your house, then that would be another exclusion. But there is some coverage in a homeowner's policy for what I call water inside the house, whether it's basically by pipes, whether it's the pipes or the hot water heater, those kinds of things. But not for any surface or groundwater outside the house, kind of like I say, attacking the house. But luckily, how that does work is you can, when you buy your homeowner's policy, you can think to yourself, well, you can do two things. You go, there's another Office of Planning and Development, and they have all kinds of flood maps, and you can see what your risk is that way, a very technical way. Or you could just think about, like, is there any chance that there could be a flood of a water event that could impact my house? And sometimes people think no. Sometimes they'll say things like, oh, but I live on the side of a hill, I can't get up here. But a good example we had here one time, we had a consumer whose neighbor lived above them, cut down a lot of trees, and so there was less ability for the ground to absorbed the water, so the water came down the hill at their house, and then they did not have flood insurance. So if there's any remote chance you might have flood insurance, then you should probably go price it out. So the first step you would do is you can get an NFIP policy, National Flood Insurance Program. So it's not really, in my mind, insurance, it's a benefits program. But you can either buy that through the insurance company, and when you buy your HO3, not all insurance companies, but a lot of them, or you can buy it, if that doesn't work, you can buy it directly from an NFIP. And things that came to my mind, I'm not an expert in NFIP, I do know about it because it's related to insurance, is that things people should know. I kind of made some of my list. It has to be a participating community. In New Hampshire, almost all communities are participating. Anyone can buy it. It doesn't require you to be in the flood zone. If you have a mortgage and you're in the flood zone, you have to buy it. That's important to know. Another important thing to understand is the limits of a flood policy. It's a little bit different than a homeowner's policy. So you get the maximum building benefit is $250,000. The maximum contents benefit is $100,000. You can purchase them separately. So if you're a renter and you only need contents coverage, then you can purchase just the contents. Other aspects of that is that there's a distinction between basically your basement, that would be an easy way to put it, your basement and then your primary house. There's less coverage for the basement, so if you have a finished basement, than there is for the primary house. Again, though, it's the maximum they're going to pay out is $250,000, whether it's on an ACV basis, so actual cash value, which is the replacement cost minus depreciation, or if it's just straight replacement. We pay $250,000, and that's how it works. And so a little bit different than that in New Hampshire, that we're, as to most other policies in New Hampshire, we're a stated value state. So we're a little dark in here. What that means is that any other loss, if you had a total loss for the full limits of your policy, you would get whatever the policy limit is, even if you don't replace it. So if you have a complete loss and you had a $1 million policy, you get the $1 million, which is an unusual thing. But this doesn't work that way for the NFIP, because NFIP is a federal program. So I think the big ticket issue there for me, always in my mind, is the $250,000. If you have a nice home, and even median homes, I think I saw the median home in New Hampshire now is like $450,000. Then what has kind of developed recently is private flood insurance, and our supervisor of compliance, which is Forms, put some statistics together, which I thought would be helpful. So back in 2004 and prior, there were no private flood insurance policies, but in the last 20 years, it's become more and more developed. So currently in New Hampshire, we have 35 companies with approved private flood insurance. So the way you could think of this is you have your homeowners policy, your HO3, that's not generally going to provide you coverage, and then you're going to have then you go, most likely you buy the NFIP policy, and then if you think the $250,000 limit's not enough, then you would buy the private flood insurance, which most of them are excess to the NFIP policy. One thing you've got to, you can go look up pretty easy in a Google search exactly what's covered under the NFIP program, but in terms of going to the private flood insurance above that would not apply to that. So you have to then, again, read your policy to make sure you understand what's covered on the private flood. And so her name's Ms. King, but Ms. King says that there are 19 companies with commercial flood and 25 with personal flood. And I'm just going to list some for you in case anyone's interested in it. There's AIG Casualty Insurance, Berkeley Insurance Company, which is a big one, Employer Insurance Company of Wausau, Federal Insurance Company, and Fidelity Indemnity Insurance Company on personal lines. They all sell it. I think they're all in excess to the NFIP. There's a disclaimer on the ISO form that they use that basically says this is excess to the NFIP. And then in commercial insurance, we have Markel Insurance Company, Milliman Appleseed LLC, Standard Guarantee Insurance Company, It's a U.S. Specialty Insurance Company and Wright National Flood. They're all selling commercial flood policies. So I guess what I'm saying is, everybody has an appetite for risk, but I think currently in New Hampshire, you can fully protect yourself from a flood loss by an NFIP policy. I mean, I think that might be a good reason to look at the flood maps for Office of Planning and Development, that they can probably gauge your risk. And then if you're in a very risky situation and you have a nice home, then you might want to work with an agent producer to look into a private flood insurance. And this, we only approve forms in the admitted market, so this would be in the admitted market, which would be the companies I just listed would be companies that we've reviewed the contracts and we're okay with them, that they don't in any way violate the public interest or represent things that they're not actually covering. Beyond that, there is most likely, I would think, surplus lines companies, so that's not the admitted market. We don't review those forms, so if you end up in the surplus lines, again, you really need to make sure you read the contract if you decide to get a private flood insurance policy. But based on the risk in New Hampshire of water damage external to the house, I think the department thinks everybody should really think long and hard about whether they need a flood insurance policy. I just want to just go back. The one other thing that a homeowner's policy will cover, again, it's by contract, but most of them do. I think almost all of them do. Is wind-driven rain. So if it's raining and you leave a window open and the water comes in through the window, then that would be wind-driven rain, and that would be covered. It's not on the ground or on the surface of the water. Surface of the ground or underground. But with that, I think that's basically how flood insurance protection works in the state of New Hampshire. If anybody has any specific questions that they want to call me and privately ask, you can call me here at the department. I'm at 271-2502, and I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you have. Other than that, I think I might be throwing it back to the commissioner.
Well, thank you, James and Vanessa. Vanessa, a lot of really important and practical advice there. You touched upon something that we really stress to consumers here at the New Hampshire Insurance Department, and that is consumers really should go through the process of documenting what is in their home. Oh, I'm told my camera's off. Not that, hang on a second. There we are. I'm back. Sorry about that. In any event, we strongly encourage consumers to do a home inventory, and it is really easy to do that. There are a lot of apps that are out there that will walk you through that. You could take pictures using your cell phone. It's, again, really, really easy process. We recommend a room-to-room approach. Take pictures of things like furniture, electronics, appliances, clothing, any other thing in your home that is of some real value. And that's going to help you, God forbid, again, you're impacted by a flood. You're going to have that flood insurance coverage, I hope, right? So you'll be able to work with the insurer at that point to be able to document all of the things that were in the home to make sure that those things are going to be covered. So we wanted to stress that point here as well. So one of the other things I'll mention, and James, I think, did a good job, but just in summary, so flood insurance coverage is going to pay for the cost of damages done to your physical property. So consumers can usually expect that coverage to protect the home's structure and the systems, such as mechanical, electric, plumbing, heating, boilers, air conditioning, all of that stuff. It also typically covers permanent appliances, flooring, permanent shelves, and cabinets. So those are the types of things that you can expect that a flood insurance coverage policy is going to cover. I would mention as well, and James did a good job of pointing this out, again, while you may be under the false sense of security that because of where your home is located, you don't need flood insurance coverage, again, I strongly advise you to reconsider that position, especially if you are living in a community that has any kind of development, whether that be commercial or residential development taking place within your community, because the result of that development might mean that water tables have changed, that floodplains are now different, or that development might just cause water to be directed in a way in an area that it pools and causes a flood risk in a way that it just has not happened in the past. Two other quick important things. So as James said, your two predominant options for coverage are the National Flood Insurance Program. That program is managed by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, otherwise known as FEMA. The NFIP is the primary source of flood insurance for property owners in the United States, but as James mentioned, there are other options. But if you're going to go the NFIP route, even though it is a government-backed option, NFIP works with participating insurance companies that sell and manage those policies. So a local independent agent is going to be able to help you navigate the process and find you the most appropriate coverage, even if you are taking advantage of the National Flood Insurance Program. With regard to the private flood insurance, private flood insurance might offer different terms, sometimes depending on where the home is located or the particular set of circumstances around that home. The coverage limits may be higher or lower. The premiums might be higher or lower. We always encourage consumers to shop that coverage to see if the NFIP program is a better option for you, or if one of the other companies that is offering flood coverage might be better for you. Important to note, too, that private flood insurance might also be customizable. It is going to be more customizable than an NFIP policy. So even if you're not at super high risk, if you've got a company, a commercial company that will work with you, you're going to have maybe a little bit more flexibility, as I said, to customize that coverage for yourself. Just to clear up some terms, when James is talking about personal lines or personal coverage versus commercial, it's important just for homeowners in this context to appreciate that personal means your individual residential home, whether it be your home, condo, building, wherever it is that you as an individual are living, versus commercial, which is any sort of a business. So hopefully that helps clarify those terms, make it a little bit more understandable for everybody. And I'll conclude by saying this. You know, inherent in our live free or die culture is the reality that living in New Hampshire carries a responsibility. And one of those responsibilities is that you as an individual are your own first line of self-defense. And it is incumbent upon all of us to take the appropriate time to work with our insurance company or an independent agent to ensure that your home is appropriately protected and that you have appropriate flood insurance coverage. And so hopefully today's presentation has stressed to you the need for it, the ways that you can access it, as well as some, again, important and practical tips that you can take to protect yourself. God forbid you should encounter any kind of a flood situation. So with that said, I'll turn it back over to Andrew or AJ for any questions that have come in.
I don't see any questions here. I'm wondering if Vanessa has any closing thoughts she'd like to share with us.
Sure. Kind of back to some of what the commissioner was stressing. You are your own first responder. We always tell people you're your own first responder for those first 72 hours. You might not be able to rely on other people to help you out in that time. So making sure that you really do have that family emergency plan in place and that you are taking care of your family and yourself is very important. And also, if you do have a flooding event, don't wait to call your insurance company or to reach out to them. We always tell people to reach out immediately if there's any sort of flooding event or damage at their house and start that claim process right away. Thank you.
Vanessa, we appreciate you joining us. Thank you. You can find this and all of our webinars on the New Hampshire Insurance Department YouTube page. Stay tuned because in the coming week, we'll have some information about next month's webinar. If you have any questions that we didn't answer, by all means, you can please reach out. Feel free to reach out to our Consumer Services Department. You can reach them at 603-271-2261 or at consumerservices@ins.nh.gov. We appreciate you joining us, and as always, thanks. Take care.